everybody at the end will go, well, kids don't do this anymore. And I'm like, but we're the adults in charge.
Welcome to Transforming the Toddler Years, a Core 4 parenting podcast for conscious, cycle-breaking parents ready to turn toddler tantrums into teachable moments. Hi, I'm Cara Tyrrell, a lifetime lover of littles, mom to 2 grown and flown girls, and an early childhood educator. Through the show, I teach you my collaborative parenting methodology for nurturing your little human's mind, body, and spirit. Because how you connect and collaborate in the first 5 years is how you raise happy, healthy kids who grow into the best version of themselves and find true success in school and life. Do you worry about your kids learning to read and write? My guest today is Stacy Benge, author of The Whole Child Alphabet Book, but it's not what you think. She's here to talk to us today about what real literacy is and how simply through interactions and organic conversations and child-led play, you can set your child up for success in literacy as they move through all the stages of education. She is an early childhood education speaker who approaches learning in the early years with practicality and common sense. Stacy has a Master of Science degree in Human Development and Family Studies and spent 10 years in the classroom teaching kids birth to 5. So she knows what she's talking about, and this conversation is going to open up so many possibilities for you, and as you'll hear, give you a permission slip to stop stressing out so much about whether or not they know their ABCs or 1, 2, 3s. Stacy, I am so excited to have you here on the show. When we met well over a year ago and you were still writing the book, I said, you're going to come on the show, right? And you said, I will, I promise. And here you are.
We're here. Yes, I'm so excited.
So your book is all about literacy foundations and raising kids who not just have early literacy well in hand, but that it grows with them and they're successful over time. And that's why I'm so thrilled you're here. I feel like we talk a lot about early childhood education in very isolated spheres, and literacy is kind of layered into the reading, the writing, and all the different pre-skills that people talk about. So what made you so passionate about writing a book about early literacy?
So throughout my career, well, if we go all the way back to when I was in college, my original major was speech and language pathology. Very long story as to how I ended up in child development, but that passion for language has always been there for me. And, and when I was teaching, I just always loved that literacy aspect of it. But through my professional career, as I learned more and more about the whole child and what all it takes to support literacy. And then as a parent as well, and especially as a parent, bringing in the physicality aspect of literacy, the sensory processing, it's not just knowing our ABCs, there's the visual, there's the auditory, and there's the actual physical development aspect of it. But it just I started really honing my passion when I was speaking on just kind of language literacy, physical development, and play. And I had so many people just say, you need to write a book. And during COVID, we became empty nesters, and my husband's like, this is your time. And so here we have it, 4 years later. So
isn't that the way? Oh my gosh. Yeah. I know. I hear you. I get up on stages and they say, where's the book? And I say, someday.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've got to make that someday a real day. Because like you said, it takes forever, right? You write it, but it's a long journey to make it into the world. And so what have you learned since sitting down to write this book about how important it really is, especially as we look at post-COVID education and post-COVID parenting?
I think just really what I've learned in talking to people since the book has come out is that I think there's a lot of misconceptions on literacy and as to, okay, if we just teach the alphabet and we teach children to read early, it's going to be good. And literacy is the whole child. There's so much more to that. And, and I think post-COVID, we're kind of in this panic mode of worrying that we have children behind. And so, instead of us opening up an environment for them to play and develop their entire selves, we're going into this direct instruction and really kind of robbing them of those opportunities. And to me, we're really missing the mark on, if we let children play and have that child-led playtime, it's amazing what all develops in their bodies and in their brains, and just their brain and body making this cohesive connection. And that really and truly is what's needed for successful literacy and really any other academic subject that we're talking about. But, I think the main thing is just, like I mentioned earlier, just that misconception of what all is needed for successful literacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Calling all of my teachers and early childhood professionals. Cara here, just popping in to say thank you. One of my favorite things about this podcast is knowing that it's not just parents who are listening, that you are part of this toddler tribe too, because you serve them on a daily basis. Did you know that I do early childhood education trainings, pre-service, in-service? And as often as I can, I float around the United States and beyond to conferences to do the work to help you do the work. I would love to connect specifically with you. So here is an opportunity to get on a one-on-one call with me, work with me. Let's get together. It's totally a free consultation, and I would love to hear who you serve, their ages, their stages, their struggles, and what type of professional development you would benefit from most. Who knows? Maybe I'll create a whole new workshop just for you, your team, and the kids that you serve. Look forward to connecting with you. And now let's get you back to this amazing episode. So can you kind of pull these two things apart for us? Because any parents who are listening, or even, childcare, early workers in this industry, I think that when you say the word play, we visualize something. And when you say the word literacy, we hear language in our head. So how do you merge those two things? Because that picture, that play picture, is very often absent of the adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a great point. So to me, when I talk about child-led play, I always encourage everybody, go back to your childhoods and what was it like, and what would you spend those endless summer days doing? And that really is child-led play. And we don't give the credit that's due to that play. And when we look at development and learning, that play is a critical required aspect of that. And so, I think when we think of literacy, we think of more of the direct instruction and children sitting there and being read to by an adult, which is, there's a time and place. But when we really look at what are the foundations of literacy, and one of the things I try to do in my book is have that starting point, which is infancy, and what are those building blocks of development that take place after that will eventually support literacy. And when we start breaking that down, you start understanding, okay, we have the visual perception, we have the brain understanding what's coming in from the eyes, we have the phonological awareness, which is the brain's ability to attune to the sounds of language and really decode that and understand, the language that's being heard. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the physicality. We don't think about the body's ability to hold a book and us being able to cross a midline, to turn a page, or to write across a page, or even things like when I turn a page, I don't rip the page. Well, that's our proprioceptive system. So we have all of these foundational skills that we don't give enough credit to. And when we recognize those and we go, okay, how do these develop? How do we get these strengthened? child-led play is the best way for that to happen. So I think even when we think of play and literacy, sometimes we think, okay, the play has to be labeled as literacy. But the reality is, when we look at how it's this whole child perspective, all play, no matter what children are playing, if they're climbing trees or building blocks, it's developing the whole child, which will support reading and writing, into those elementary years.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the alphabet puzzle.
Exactly. And I think
Yeah.
that's a great point. It doesn't have to be like, and that's one of the quotes I have in my book. It doesn't have to be labeled literacy to support literacy. So any puzzle, will be
Yeah.
supporting the visual perception and what's called form constancy, and, any type of blocks. There doesn't have to be letters on the blocks. Any type of block play will support it. So I think it just comes to us as the adult really recognizing those foundational skills and respecting them. And when we do, I think it hopefully puts us in a position to start embracing that child-led play a lot more.
Stacy, I think what you're really giving people is a permission slip, because parents and caregivers, it's a big responsibility, it feels like, right? We walk around in a loving way saying, you are your child's first teacher. And they're like, but wait, I'm not trained to be a teacher. And so they get all the apps and they get the blocks with the letters, and they do the puzzles that match. And they think, okay, this is my job. I'm supposed to prepare my child for learning by doing this. You're saying you can strip it down. It can be authentic. It can be simple, and you can just follow your intuition.
Absolutely. And I love how you said that. It's giving, parents permission to, and I think it's just us changing the lens with which we're looking at it through, and there's a lot of pressure when you feel you're the first teacher, and we all want our children to be successful. Yeah, I think anybody in the early education industry, we want all kids to be successful, but I think it's us going, okay, it's not this top down, it's not the earlier is better. It is building the stronger foundation. And that happens so much through play. And, when I mentioned earlier where I encourage everybody to think back to their childhoods, a little activity I do in my trainings is, I'll have everybody list, what did you do as a child? And first of all, everybody lights up and they get so excited. But then I'm like, let's analyze it. What all was developing? What all were you learning? What all was that building? And what's so funny is everybody at the end will go, well, kids don't do this anymore. And I'm like, but we're the adults in charge. So we're the ones who need to create this environment that encourages and lets that happen.
Oh my gosh, I am going to give everyone a peek into the childhood of Cara. I think I was just born with this analytical kind of nerd gene. My version of fun, Stacy, and I am not kidding. I'm answering your question, right? I look back, and what did I like to do on a good Sunday afternoon? Alphabetize my books in my home library. And I actually put those little tags in them so that people could check them out. I've always been a system creator. And, that says a lot about the fact that that's my version of fun. And it makes a lot of sense now when you look and see where I've gone into the world. But you're reminding me of the early stages of my career when I trained as a reading recovery teacher. Are you familiar with the program?
Yes.
Yeah, I figured as much. And they taught us right out of the gate, there were 3 things that it was our job to make sure that children were assessing when they looked at pages of books. Does it look right? Does it sound right? And does it make sense? And as you're talking about these perceptual pieces of language, we can be tapping into those in nature, in the real world, inside that play opportunity. We can be bringing in the language that will help them then actually pull apart and make sense of the printed word when they're older.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I always say, the core of literacy is language. And how does language develop? By children actually using it and engaging in it a lot. And then if they're guiding it and they're having conversations about what's important to them, that conversation goes so much longer than if we have a scripted prompt of some sort, But if it's something that they want to tell you about, and we are face to face with them, they're just going to keep talking, talking, talking. And if they're talking with their peers, those conversations go on and on and on. Well, that's building all that language, which, like we're saying, is the core of reading, writing down the line.
Okay, I have a really important question for you. I have a really, really special human in my life who I was blessed to be her nanny from about 6 weeks old, and she's now 6.5 years old. Mm-hmm. And she knew all her ABCs, all her 1, 2, 3s. That girl was a whip, right? She was an early talker. And everybody in her sphere, me notwithstanding, because I understand the meaning of it, just kept telling her how smart she was at a very young age. Kindergarten came and she showed up, and all of a sudden she was quiet, she was shy, and she was never these things before. Outgoing, independent, like, I got this, just let me do my thing. And when it came to literacy in the classroom, it would bring her to tears to try to interact with other kids or the teacher or answer questions. And so we've kind of came to this conclusion that it was a confidence-based issue, not a knowledge-based issue. How do you recommend people engage with their kids who clearly gain these skill sets earlier than most to build that confidence, that foundation, so that they don't get gun shy when they have to be doing it in a social setting?
And I kind of want to go back to knowing all the ABCs. And there are some children who are so into it and that's their thing. And you have other children who it's not quite their thing, and that's okay too. And I would make sure on the alphabet that there is that it's true knowledge, not just the memorization surface knowledge. So, because it's amazing. Children, they can memorize symbols and they can regurgitate a lot of things. But if you are interacting with the alphabet, making sure it's more authentic, more not just knowing the alphabet, but experiencing it in just kind of a natural, real world, opportunity. But then I think just kind of showing how important it is for children to just have those language skills. And, and some kids are, I think, a little bit more on the quiet nature. And so, but just making sure that they, whatever you say is okay. It's a safe, make sure the environment it's a safe space to speak whatever it is that you want to speak. But yeah, and I think just kind of keep it in mind too, that when we are preparing children to go into kindergarten, that there's so much more than just knowing some of the things. It is how do you interact with others? How do you follow directions? How do you, kind of function with that environment? That really is probably the main skill kids need to be successful once they go off to school.
Absolutely. And it's okay to make a mistake.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
That's a big one. I feel like kids these days, especially when they are praised for knowing things, they want to continue to be praised for knowing things. So saying something out loud that you're not sure of means you may not get that reaction from the adult.
I always relate that to that's taking a risk. And, you're stepping outside your comfort zone. You're trying something. If it doesn't go okay, it's the pulling yourself back up and trying again. And when I talk about big body play and risky play on the playground, I always make that connection. That's where a lot of that begins too, is that I jump a little higher, I swing higher, I climb higher. That's that risky play really translates into I can answer something in a class. And if it's not the correct answer, I'm okay. I can get back up and try again. So those all kind of connect together. I kind of took us a little bit off topic there, but when you said that, I'm like, yeah, it is that taking a risk.
That's 100% on topic, because you're talking whole child, right? The expressiveness that they're going to be able to use to access literacy in every way comes from all those experiences. And I love that you're talking about those gross motor skills and those fine motor skills. I want to take us all the way back to your early days as an SLP.
Well, and I ended up not getting my degree in that. I ended up switching. So I never practiced as an SLP.
But you have the knowledge base. It's in there.
Hopefully, yeah.
Interestingly, I just want to say this out loud, since I have a platform to say it. When I was in Japan, someone introduced themselves to me as an SLT. And I said, oh, that's not a familiar, I don't know what is, I'm a speech and language therapist. And I said, why do we call them SLPs? Why do we have pathologist in there? Like, it's a nerd term. It's a linguistic term that I just feel we need to switch out. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And I think it used to be a therapist. And I kind of feel like and I could, if SLPs are listening, do not quote me on this, I could be wrong, but I feel like in the early 90s, it kind of transitioned to pathologist, but I can't remember as to why that's the term we use, not therapist.
My tiny little soapbox moment for the day.
Yeah.
But my question is, we know that a lot of our COVID babies who are toddlers and preschoolers now have speech delays. And it's kind of become an educational epidemic, and that the referral system is overloaded and it's very hard for these families to get what they need right now. So in the world of play, for kids who are struggling to pronounce these phonemes, how would you counsel parents to try to bring some of that in so they can be practicing at home?
And I think that all play, one of the things I mentioned in my book, one of my soapboxes is the materials we bring into play have no batteries, like just, and have cars and trains and puppets and materials that encourage children to play around with their voices and play around with sounds. And so, parents, if you're playing with your child, and we're playing with the train, you emphasizing the ch sound, or if you're doing a car, or whatever that sound may be. But in those play experiences where it's natural and it's not interrupting the actual playtime, us finding the opportunity to bring in a variety of sounds and, make it fun where children might be mimicking us and copying us. And I think it's also very important. You had mentioned earlier, sometimes as parents, when we feel like we're the first teacher and we download the apps and everything, turn the screens off. And I know this is like one of my big soapboxes. There's a time and place that we want to sit on the couch and watch a show together. That's fine. We have times to FaceTime with our relatives that live far away. That's fine. But when you look at the voices that children are hearing off a screen versus real life voices, it stimulates the brain differently. And if children are plugged into a screen, they're not hearing, not only are they not hearing the sounds, the brain's not, tuning into like the auditory localization, like where's that sound coming from, or that figure ground of, pulling my parents' voice from the background sounds of the grocery store. Children don't get that opportunity if they're plugged into an app. And so just hearing just the natural environmental sounds, I think it's so important for that phonological awareness. So when you go to the grocery store, have the children look around and have them, if they're up and they engage eye contact with somebody else in the grocery store, usually that person will start a conversation with them. They're hearing more language, which sounds a little bit different than our voices, the same with restaurants, but just children hearing so much language and sound. And when we have devices on as adults, we talk so much less. So us being cognizant of, I need to put the phone down. When I'm with my child, I need to be totally engaged. It doesn't mean like you have to like always be like directing whatever's happening, but being engaged, having, using words, having conversations. Because, a lot of what this is coming down to is children were not hearing language. And it wasn't, it is because a lot of times they were not in school, but it's also because as the adults, we weren't talking to them either. So I think it's just having a lot of those conversations.
This is so fascinating. I had someone on recently who said, as adults, however well-meaning, and having the right information to do it, we cannot replicate or mimic the quality of peer-to-peer verbal interactions. How do you feel about that?
I would agree with that too, because I think as adults, sometimes we might not take the conversation where it needs to go. And sometimes we can, but I just feel like children who have the same interest and they're, it's kind of like we want to talk with other adults sometimes. Children want to talk with other children. And the conversations that they have. And I think they can take more risk in their conversations if they're, peer to peer. But especially like if you're in a school environment or you're in a classroom, well, that's your familiarity. That's your common ground you have. So you're talking about what's going on there. And I think children are more likely to really that make believe and that creativeness, when they're peer to peer. But yeah, and again, I think that comes to us just allowing children to play and, letting them guide it and let them talk about what it is that they want to talk about with friends who want to listen to them. And we're the same as adults. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm a language geek. Like I just love pulling apart languages. And I'm a big fan of even saying to kids, I mean what I say and I say what I mean, right? That the meaning behind our words is what matters, not just saying words. And one of the things that I teach parents how to do, and I'm so curious about your take on this, is to interpret their tone and interpret their emotions with words. So I am so frustrated right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed because you won't stop asking me the same question over and over. This is my frustrated voice. What do you think about that?
I think that's a great idea because, and we know that children, that they recognize if a tone is, upsetting or if it's gleeful, children can really recognize that tone. I had a guy in one of my trainings one time who said he was yelling at his dog and his daughter, who was probably only like, a little bit over a year old, got upset. And he recognized that she knew his tone, although it was not directed at her, but she understood that tone was there. So I think us labeling, okay, this when my voice sounds like this, it is my frustration or whatever it may be, so that children can recognize that. And I think that helps them to label their feelings and recognize when their tone changes, as well. So when we say to them, don't speak to me in that tone or whatever it may be, they actually, can understand what that means.
Yeah. And I do it from an emotional regulation standpoint, but I love, as I was listening to you, I was like, wow, this is, like you said, literacy based. Everything is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, Stacy, I try to keep these episodes to around this time frame so that people can actually listen to them because they're busy parents. But there's a whole book for them to explore. Yes. The link will 100% be in the show notes, but tell everyone once again the name of the book and your preferred location for them to go get it.
So it's The Whole Child Alphabet, How Young Children Actually Develop Literacy. And it's available through Exchange Press. So if you go to exchangepress.com/ABC, or if you just Google that, that's where you can get the book. And there's a Kindle version as well on Amazon.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for taking your message out to the world and being yet another voice who is shifting that early childhood education space.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, keep doing what you know how to do out there. Stay mindful and proactive as we transform the toddler years.